Wer nicht aus der Geschichte lernt, ist dazu verdammt, dieselben Fehler zu machen. Und die Älteren in einer Gesellschaft, die über Erfahrung verfügen, sollten die Jüngeren unterrichten. A people who do not learn from their mistakes are doomed to make these mistakes. And the people who have experience in a society should teach the younger ones. Now, a lot of the times when people come along and they express their concern about certain situations, especially in the annals of government and politics, some people may misinterpret their intent. So sometimes there are people who may have a genuine concern, and the way they express that genuine concern may come across as alarming. And in the process of expressing that deep concern, especially if they see that things are going along a path that would lead to destruction or disruption, they may express that feeling with high energy, high passion, and would probably scream at the top of their lungs, hoping that the people concerned would understand what they're saying and would be able to see exactly what they're talking about. But it's quite obvious, sometimes you end up getting the opposite effect, especially from the people who you're actually preaching to. Because sometimes they misinterpret your intent and believe that somehow, because you may offer positive criticism, that you are against them, which is actually entirely the opposite. So what ends up happening is that it leads to a level of, in some respects, frustration. That here you are pleading your case to people, and you, because of your own personal experience, understand where things are heading. And you're asking yourself, why the people who should know a little better, who are actually in a position to determine the future of a nation and should have a little bit of political savviness, and you realize that they don't. Because if they did, they would have readily saw what you were saying. It made sense. It was logical. It was compelling. It was based on sound, critical thinking. So for months upon months upon months, I have said that fraternalizing with remnants of socialist Marxists is detrimental and is leading us down a very destructive path and could have major consequences. Now, when you make mistakes locally, like you had an issue with Cloget and other issues you may have had, locally you can correct those mistakes. And the people of Grenada, especially those who support you, may be forgiven. And you can regain their trust. But unfortunately, in the annals of global politics, where competition is very steep, and things you say or do may be perceived in the wrong way and may result in dire and grave consequences, one has to be even more careful, because the consequences for what you say and your actions, as I have said, can be very grave. As we have now seen. Now, recently, I'm sure by now, you all may be very aware of the visa restrictions placed on Grenada's finance minister. Now, I think that is not an accident. I think it's a deliberate message. Notice it's the finance minister. So I think whoever placed those restrictions are signaling and are saying to the current administration that we need to talk, and seriously talk. Because somehow they may be upset, because somehow they may perceive things that are being done may be threatening their economic and political interests. And as I have said, states always do or should do what is in their political interests and economic interests. And anything that is done should be done for the protection of their administration and their citizens, especially. So as recent as a couple of days ago, I went on ride along and I had a very interesting conversation with Kemen Jr. And a lot of the things that I've been talking about for months, I tried to reiterate. And in some respects, my co-guests trivialized a lot of what I said. And again, I was very passionate about what I said. And I tried to remind my guests and the hosts that what we're dealing with here is no joke. Again, especially when you're dealing with global politics. And as I said on the show, that there are states who will always try to do what is in their best interest, which every state should. And there is no telling as to what length or how far they will go to protect those economic and political interests, as we have seen currently. So currently also, parallel to that, there's a situation that is developing in the Caribbean. The United States has projected serious military power in the Caribbean, unforeseen in recent times. And there is no telling which direction this may go. So I think it is even more critical at this juncture that Grenada, as a nation, for its own preservation, should clarify its position on many issues that may be concerning to the parties involved. Now, because things have gotten so far ahead, I think it requires extreme skill and maneuvering and political tact and diplomacy to try to resolve this issue. I hope and pray that the current administration is up to the task. I am optimistic that a lot of this can be resolved amicably. At this stage, it's, however, very difficult. Had there been a little bit of foresight initially, a lot of this could have been averted. And as it is always said, it is easier to stay out of trouble than to get into trouble and then try to get out of trouble. Hence the reason why I tried so dearly to say and to try to warn about the possibility and the consequences of certain actions. And unfortunately, in some respects, I was spot on what I said. I am not happy about that. I was hoping that I could have been wrong. As much as I knew that what I was saying was actually based in reality, was logical, was reasonable, and I think anyone who was paying attention would have agreed with me. Unfortunately, I realized even when I went on Ride Along's show that there are many people who do not understand, after all this access we've had to the internet, to the world, and all the available information at our fingertips, that there are many people who still do not understand the way the global game of politics works. Grenada was actually in a very good position because Grenada has had major experiences in the early 80s in dealing with a very confrontational global political climate, in which, in some respects, they got caught up. And we all know how dire those consequences were for Grenada. It resulted in an internal squabble that saw brother turn against brother and many lives lost. It resulted in pretty much the death and destruction of a whole administration. It resulted in the United States sending 10,000 troops to invade the island, which again led to a lot of death and destruction. That, however, obviously was welcome given the circumstances of what was prevailing before the invasion. So I would have thought that experienced people, grown people in the society who may have been part of, these experiences, intimately part of it, would have understood the implications of getting remotely close to anything of that nature. Grenada, militarily and politically, has minimal ability to project power. So, that being said, you would think that political maneuvering, great cunning, and politically strategic decision-making should be the best approach to any situation that Grenada is confronted with. Emotional responses, sensationalism, and impulsiveness should never be the order of the day. So I understand it's a very youthful population, and a lot of young people may not have the political understanding or political maturity about the global political dynamic. It is the responsibility of grown people who have experience in the society to teach them, because these are the people who would be the leaders of tomorrow. And collectively, as a population, I think there is one good slogan to mimic from the PRG, which went to the effect of each one teach one. There's a good slogan that should be incorporated on a daily basis in the society. So again, I just want to reiterate that grown people who have had experience in dealing with many of the things that Grenada is being confronted with right now should step in and should have conversations with the relevant people as to how to deal with what is brewing right now. My hope is that good judgment, patience, wisdom, understanding, and strategic reasoning would prevail. I hope the recent appearance on Ride Along, again, or much of what I've said has actually come to fruition. So I hope a lot of what I have said, a lot of people would have learned from it. And I don't do comments, but of course, I have friends who look at the comments in those shows, and they would tell me some of the basal things that would be said. And it's sad in some respects that, again, at this stage in our lifetime, with the access to so much information, that level of reasoning would still prevail. I hope that many would have learned and would have realized that much of what I have been saying for months was not because I had something against the administration. As I said, quite to the contrary. We all, irrespective of how we may feel or think, would like to see Grenada progress and head in the right direction. And some of that is happening. But when you're making progress, especially in the annals of tourism, and year to year your tourism is increasing, and then you have other resources on the island that are allied with certain people in the world or certain nations in the world, one has to tread cautiously. One has to be careful about what one says as a nation. Again, you may have your personal, individual feelings about everything. But in the annals of statesmanship, you have to be careful what you say, because some may misinterpret what you say as being representative of the administration. Again, I'm not going to be too long on this. This is all I'm going to say on this. And I hope for the best outcome in all of this, even at this very dismal stage. And I apologize for being so subdued and always looking down, or being so melancholy right now. But I feel a sense that, the climate requires that sort of mood. And for those who, usually like me a lot more upbeat and raging, yeah, as I said, I apologize to you. I'm just not in that sort of mood. Guten Tag.